Yes, thanks all. It's a really great pleasure to be here. I'm going to give a brief overview on my thoughts on Edge. Let me just get the presentation working and then I will start. So if we share this, and hopefully you'll be able to see my screen. I hope you're seeing the correct screen. So
yeah, it's absolutely fine, Steve. Perfect.
Wonderful. So yeah, what I'm going to talk about briefly here is some sort of strategies for edge compute. What does it mean? I suppose try and give you a definition from how we at Limelight think about it. Try and step back a bit, talk about what opportunity there is for edge in content delivery workflows. Look at some of the challenging points. There's been some very interesting points from looking in there about how to look at it from a sort of telco network operator perspective and the challenges in the ecosystem. So I'm trying to touch on some of those things, and I'll end without too much of a sales pitch, but tell you what we're focusing on from our side on how to enable our customers' workloads more, which is really what the point is. Very briefly, for those of you who don't know me, I work at Limelight Networks. I'm the VP of Edge Strategy and Solution Architecture. I've been in the CDN industry for quite a number of years, over a decade, maybe about 12 years now, 13 years. I've worked at Limelight in a number of roles in operations, product management, and now strategy. And in days before Limelight, I sat in many a satellite truck and data center managing small CDN in the UK. So let's start with some basic questions. And I think the first thing really to say is we certainly don't think about the edge as the device at the moment, and certainly not where I'm going to focus anyway. I'm sure some people do think about the device as the edge, but I'm going to sort of step back a bit further. And really, as with the last presentation, I'm thinking about the edge as the intersection into the last mile networks and at the point of distribution into the broadband, the mobile, and the carrier networks. So that's where I think the edge is, and certainly that works for us in terms of how we think about where we intersect with internet service providers and how we think about where we deliver content from and how it's getting to the end user. So we think about the direct interconnection into the ISPs. We run a global network, a private backbone-based network to do that. And we put our points of presence increasingly deeper into the ISPs, as well as at the connection points to them and the broader internet. I think really what edge computing is about getting these at-scale resources closer to where they're going to be used. So we know from all of the trends we see and all the kind of reports that the companies on this this conference put out there about the trends in the marketplace. And I'll come on to a few of them in a minute, but we know that there is a wider and broader range of devices consuming content. The trend is really in moving the workloads towards where they are. And the concept therein is to, as it says, make these things better. Well, what does better mean? Better is really a proxy for all kinds of performance. So performance in some cases is quality of experience for video distribution. It's a really common CDN concept to be able to understand those speeds and feeds and the KPIs of QoE. Performance is also the monetization of content. Performance is also how many video clips did one user watch in a row. Performance is also how easy was it for us to understand what happened during a viewer's session. How complicated is it to get the introspection that you really need at a process level in all of the workloads. So better has a lot of context and performance has a lot of context. And that's really important in the concept of the edge, because it's really about bringing these processes closer to the end user to make them perform better in whatever terms performance means for that particular function. And it's particularly becoming important where there's more desire to have near or actual real-time interactivity. such as deciding where to send a request, deciding what content to give back, deciding what bitrate ladder to deliver, deciding how to do the ad insertion, deciding the authentication for the application, all of those small, tiny decisions that you need to do very quickly, but also understand if they're happening well. Those real-time experiences need to happen, and those real-time processes need to happen quickly. And the situational awareness of what's happening at the moment is also, from a content owner's perspective, they're trying to help themselves understand what we're doing as consumers, what's happening during my experience, and how can that be made better for me so that I become a content and continuously repeat viewer in the world where I may have 2 or 3 subscriptions and I turn to transactional services if they're available, or advertising services if they're available, but those maybe I will be much more picky about. So edge computing is about moving those processes out towards the end user so that they can be done in a more high performant manner. Let's go from there and look at what we think the opportunities and where and why it's important to think about this sort of separation of the workload and the content as well. If we look at cable in the States, it took 60 years to reach a sort of 87–90% penetration, right? So full market penetration, and it's only really taken OTT 12 years to reach that same kind of number, and it's still growing. What I think is important about this is it's been a frenetic pace of adoption by the consumer, and at the same time, as consumers, we've also changed our buying habits. We all buy, or at least have access to, new devices very quickly in today's world, versus the amount of time that you'd have bought, or your parents would have bought a TV and it would have stayed in the house for a long time, versus buying a new one. So there's been a rapid and broad adoption of OTT, and it's massively continuing and offers many opportunities for different types of experiences to be brought to the devices that we're all watching. And for us as content distributors and service providers to think about the differences between the lean back entertainment environment, the lean forward entertainment environment, and the handheld entertainment environment. The other side of the data here that's showing how OTT is growing is to look at the global rise of streaming. So some pretty broad numbers here, but if you look at revenue by region and how these numbers grow over time, what we're seeing is a large growth outside of the US as much as there is growth inside the US too. And so we've seen from all of the platform launches that there are global audiences for some of the same content. There are global audience for a lot of the same brands who then have discrete content for those different locations. And there's a blend of those things as well. There are regional providers, country-only providers, and there are global providers. So there then becomes a challenge for thinking about how do you deal with the idiosyncrasies of different countries and how people interact with services in different countries, what technology is available to them, and how those things are going to work well. And that again leads you to have to think about, do I deploy all the same workload everywhere, or can I find a path to deploying individual workloads into individual places so that that environment works well for the audience that's there? And if we think then also about the live side of things and interactivity, whilst we can look at all of the numbers of growth in the OTT world in general, live and event-driven traffic is one area that looks like it's really going to grow fast and continue to grow fast. And what's different with live traffic, of course, is that it's about interactivity. So 3 examples here: gaming and live gaming, and interactivity with live gaming is a highly interactive environment. The kind of concept where we're talking about VR and AR more, whether or not you think they're going to take off in the type of medical environment that we're looking at here, or whether they're going to be part of an entertainment environment, there's going to continue to be an increase in VR and AR, which has a totally different demand on real-time and interactivity, and a totally different demand on where data is processed in order to understand what's happening. And the third one here is about interaction with sporting or event-based content. And this particular example is looking at betting, of course. And that, while betting is one clear example of interactivity, that the type of real-time events that it's driving and is driven by are also key for things like instant replay that's controlled by the user, or trying to understand what's happened in a play and being able to dig up data on individual players, for example. The additional opportunities that live sports bring and data planes bring is interesting for increasingly interactive environments, I think. So the implication here is that you've got to reach more people, but you've got to reach them faster. What we've really seen is that as the industry has matured, we're reaching more and more people, and the expectation of those people is more and more that things just work instantly. We're expecting our phones to respond to our fingers very quickly. We're expecting our screens to respond to the input from the remote control very quickly. And so whilst OTT is a different environment from broadcast, and I'm not necessarily talking about stream latency here, what we do see is that the need for the applications to work well, the need for the interactions that we are giving those applications, and the way that our data or data from the services are used is critically important in terms of that experience and that performance of those environments working. We think really that the key for OTT now is that we are in this phase where there are now many additional demands from consumers about content. What will we put up with in terms of searching for content? What will we put up with in terms of how easy it is to get to the channels and the content that I want through the application? My subscription management processes, the updates that I get to the apps. These are all now part of our routines that we go through when we're consuming content on the internet. And so it's really important that we consider these changes in consumer behavior and what that means both for the application environment and for the content as well. We've talked a bit already about performance, which is a key focus, but security obviously of the content, the rights, security of our data, security of our purchase of the data, and our security of our digital lives is very important as consumers. And more it seems that we are looking for content that is highly relevant to our environment, that has this degree of near real-time or real-time interactivity that feels like it's responding to what I want. And from the content distributor perspective, observability of the workload and the workflow in particular, end-to-end, is really important. And then insight into the analytics of what's happening. There were some questions earlier in the QoE session about what can we see and how much can we see. And being able to understand what's happening in the player is one thing, but do you understand what's happening in the application environment as much as in the decisions being made by the player to choose which bitrate from the bitrate ladder? Those kinds of observability and insight on a per session basis are becoming more and more important. Outside of video, just I suppose to make this point really, we're seeing enormous changes in the world's industries, massive digital transformation for everybody. And I think what's important about this and how it links to the edge conversation is that we've seen over the last period of time and at this point in time that a lot of companies are insourcing technical skills. A lot of our customers, a lot of the companies that we work with every day have deep technical benches, highly competent DevOps teams who are working on software rather than single purpose systems that they would have used in the past. So the technical skills to manage the environments have been brought inside, and the single purpose systems are being replaced with microservice environments, service oriented architectures, bare metal environments, cloud environments, and in particular, and most importantly, the concept of scaling on demand. That's what the current in-source outsource model looks like. So what are the challenges that this is going to bring about if we're in a world where, in addition to distributing more and more content, we also need to look after the interactivity, we need to look after the security, we need to look after the relevance of the content to the individual, and we're going to move more processing towards them into and towards the ISPs and more towards the device. What are the challenges that this brings? I think the first one is about the data centers and how we think about data center hierarchy, cloud, data center, and network hierarchies. the edge, if you think about it as being part of the so-called fog layer, right? It's there to intercept data that's traveling between devices and the centers of the network. It's there to do aggregate processing and either pass the results back down to the devices or send them back up the chain towards the middle. So the edge is adding this complexity. It's going to be significantly sophisticated. Again, Mukadim's presentation talked about how the complexity of distributing the workload so they can be coordinated in the right place and the partnership that will be needed to enable that. So the sophistication of the application set is going to be really, really important, and it's going to drive a load of requirements to edge platform providers. And it'll need us to think about how to do things differently as well. In particular, there'll be a change from what we think about today as how to provide services in a use case specific way. Let's provide some transrate or transcode services that do specific things for HLS or Dash, versus a platform which a customer can deploy their own code to, which will do that transrate, transmux, transcode process, but on their terms rather than the service provider's terms. So it's a move from the use case to the platform. And if we're doing that at the edge of the networks, it then comes to a question of, well, who is going to provide the platforms? Is it going to be a coordinated effort between the network operators, the cloud providers in the middle, the data centers, the CDNs, and how do we get the data services into the right place? Really quickly thinking about the problems we're solving in a different way. If we think about where the cloud service providers are, and here's an example of some AWS regions, as I would call them, centrally located, and on the right is the challenge. What it's really about is trying to say, well, look, we don't need to do all of it in the cloud and then send it all forward and take all of the messaging back and then process it in the cloud again, because that does introduce latency in all aspects of the applications. It consumes bandwidth, which is expensive in the cloud. And there are reliability aspects to think about. Is it the right thing to do to send that data that distance? Is there a better way to do it, becomes the question. So we think about it, and if we were to overlay our edge locations, or some of them, onto the AWS centralized regions, we think there is opportunity to provide the processing capability closer to where the end user is, improve that experience for the parts of the application and the environment that need to work quickly. We're improving that performance and looking at eliminating the data transfer and the challenges that that can bring to performance and reliability. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes then talking about where our focus is on those things. I think that's broadly the spectrum of the problem set that we're looking at. I will just very quickly go through this in the couple of 2.5 minutes. I've got that. So our focus, we want the internet and IP to be the best platform and protocols for video enablement and distribution. We want to be the best at distributing video and OTT video. We want to provide those compute and delivery platforms that our customers can build their world-class products on. And we want to help our customers execute their vision with the help of our expertise in technology and network. The foundations of what we have really, we think, fall into 4 key areas. So first of all, there's the asset locations, the points of presence, the CDN POPs, the network. We have a broad network running around the globe. It's private backbone based. It's in 120 different locations. Those locations are close to, if not connected into directly, the last miles, and in some places further than that. So we have locations close to every user, and we're able to distribute compute, networking, and storage to those locations. The backbone is important for us. It helps us ensure high quality of delivery and high QoE for streaming. It can also help ensure that for compute. There's a service layer that we have in there, and I'll talk a bit about that in just a second. And on top of that is the sort of pervasive elements of multi-tenancy service security, the management and optimization of those services, the insight, the orchestration and the observability of them, and the way in which we run that. So we think those are the sort of the foundations of how to build a set of edge services. And we've already been doing it for a while. These are just 4 examples of things that we run throughout our network at the edge, if you like. ArcLight is a version of logic that runs in the request and response flows, programmable logic in every CDN service that we have throughout our network. MMD is a set of services which are designed to transrate and transmux content on the fly, incorporate things like DRM into them, create dash and HLS output. These are services that are already deployed throughout the network and are effectively edge services, so including our storage environment and including our real-time streaming environment, which is a WebRTC service distributed throughout the network. So these are all applications that we run in our network today at scale as an edge. I'm going to turn to this one. EdgeFunctions is something that we're doing, which is to provide a real edge for our customers. This is a serverless compute model. We're offering up an environment which our customers can use. And what our aim is to provide this expressive programming model for our customers to use the programming languages they're familiar with, deploy code that runs on demand in the CDN. It's an execution environment. It's next to the CDN, and it's built on the basis of being a secure multi-tenant service. The aim is to provide scale on demand for small application workloads that run when you need them, and it's a fully serverless environment. It runs through the CDN, so the customer works with our APIs to provide their function, which we distribute and deploy throughout the network. We're going to support a number of different languages as we come to market with this. The user makes a request to the EdgeFunction environment over HTTP through our CDN. The function runs, the body and the headers, then whatever your function is designed to do runs, executes, talks to external resources as it needs to, computes its result, and sends it back through the CDN, so you can also take advantage of caching. And this is really the first thing that we think of as our a true edge offering. And we think there are a number of different use cases that speak to it that are true for streaming and are true for content delivery in general. I realize I'm running over a bit, so I'll leave you there and say thank you for listening. And I think we're going to go on to a faster chat and we'll talk about all of these things more there. So Dom, I'll stop sharing and hand it back to you.